I'd like to welcome everybody to this
Don't go for a
meeting
climb.
of Jefferson Township. Welcome you to summer, and I hope everybody had a nice Memorial Day weekend. Now it's back into the swing of things. We've got a great program scheduled for you this evening. Two great speakers. We'll talk more about them later. But as always, first thing we do is pledge of allegiance. So would everyone please rise. Senator Jim Lembke to lead us in the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We'd start off with our speakers this evening, but first of all, I want to introduce myself. I'm Rich McNary. I'm the committee man. And we have Frida Keno. She's our committee woman. So Frida, stand up. Our first speaker this evening, I'm losing my voice, is Senator Jim Lembke. And Jim's just completing his first term and is now running in a newly configured district, and I'm sure he'll tell us about it. Jim is one of the hardest working people in politics, and his last election demonstrated the value of hard work when he won by, what was it, 70 votes or 71?
70 votes out of 90,000 cast.
But there just happened to be 70 polling places in your district, is that correct? Okay. All right. And that shows one vote, the significance is one vote. So Jim's going to tell us a little bit about what he's been doing in Jeff City, why he is up here talking to us in Jefferson Township, which has become very important to him. And without further ado, let's have a warm welcome for Jim Lembke.
Well, thank you. It's good to be with you. I think the last time that I actually addressed the Jefferson Township, I don't know, Frida, can you remember? No? Well, it's been a couple of years, and I was invited, and I think I spoke on some constitutional issues, and it might even have been when nullification, that issue, became, becoming back in vogue, and I think I spoke on that issue, and it was a great evening, had a lot of great questions, and it's good to be back. As Rich said, I served 6 years in the House, representing a district down in South County, and then when the first district became open because of term limits, I forego my last term in the House and ran for the Senate. And I won that race in 2008. Not a very good year for Republicans, if you can remember. And we won that race by 70 votes out of 90,000 cast. And actually there were 71 polling places in the first district at the time. So never let anybody tell you that your vote doesn't count. It certainly does. And I knocked on 17,000 doors in that race. And now I'm 4 years older. I hope to be able to get to 17,000 doors, but as I mentioned earlier somewhat, it'll help me with my waistline, so that's a good thing. I'm a hard campaigner. I love to campaign. I love to meet the people that I am actually looking to become their senator. Okay, we live in a representative republic, and I go to work for you. I work for the people in Jefferson City. And I think it's important for me to find out what's important to the people I'm looking to represent. And that's why I try to get out and talk to as many voters as possible. And I'm not discriminate. I knock on every door where there's a registered voter. Because every time that I've run for office, I've run in a district that's a Democrat district. And this time will not be any different. Okay, this district is about 45.5% Republican. Okay, the district I ran in 2008 is about 49% Republican district. We've always outperformed the district that we've run in. And I think that's because of a good team and hard work. And I think that's what brings home a victory. So I want to talk a little bit about our race coming up in November, but I thought I'd spend a couple of moments to talk about what happened in this last session down in Jefferson City. And what my philosophy is as far as my service to you. And I really believe that although I'm a senator, one of 34, that every vote I cast or don't cast affects every Missourian. So I think it's important to know who's representing you and why they're down there. So I want to talk a little bit about what happened this session. Now I've got some numbers I want to share with you. And these numbers are kind of interesting. I didn't bring any to compare in previous years, but just to give you an idea about the tone and what is actually happening in Jefferson City. In the Senate this year, there were 479 bills introduced. 479 bills introduced by 34 senators. All right? Out of those 479, 37 of those were truly agreed and finally passed. What that means is that they went on to the governor's desk. All right, meaning the governor will either sign them, veto them, or let them sit on his desk and become law. Now this governor has, especially in controversial things, has a tendency to let that happen occasionally. He doesn't like controversy. And quite frankly, that's why he's been able to keep his approval rating as high as he has. Nixon will let bills that are controversial just become law, not veto them and not sign them. Okay, so in the Senate, that was a little over 7% of the bills that were introduced hit the governor's desk. Okay? In the House, listen to this. In the House, there were 1,072 bills introduced. All right? 76 of those were truly agreed to and finally passed and went to the governor's desk. And that was about 7%. Right at 7% of the bills introduced in the House. The reason I bring that up is I think it's important for everybody to realize that whenever any representative or senator gets elected and goes to Jefferson City, goes to Washington, D.C., this is my 10th session in the General Assembly. And when you first get down there, you think, well, I got to get down here, I got to pass some laws, right? Every representative, every senator think that's the most important thing to do. Well, I got to tell you, after 10 years, I finally, and I think I figured it out a number of years ago, but I figured out we got enough laws on the books. You know, when John Ashcroft left office in the early 90s, the state of Missouri had 8 statute books about this thing. 8 statute books. Today we have 22 statute books of this thing. We have enough laws. Okay, every time we pass a law, you lose a little bit of your liberty. All right? Unless we're passing a law like McNary passes that actually repeals statutes. And you're going to hear from Cole, but as his service in the House, that was really his focus, looking at obsolete laws that maybe have been on the books forever and repealing them. Now, that's a good law to pass. I think he passed another one this year. Thank you. 2 of them. Very good. Another area that we introduce in the Senate and the House are something called SJRs, Senate Joint Resolutions, and HJRs, House Joint Resolutions. And what these are is a representative or a senator that has an idea that they want to put before the people, because these are actually put in place to give you the opportunity to change your Constitution, to change the Missouri Constitution. All right? And in the Senate, the introduced SJRs this year were 29. 29 SJRs were introduced, and 1 SJR passed through the process and will now go to the people. It doesn't go to the governor's desk. Okay, it automatically goes to the people. And that was SJR 51. Just so happened, I was the author of that SJR. I introduced it, and it's a bill, and I'm going to talk about it in a minute. It's a bill that I've introduced 7 years in a row. And it finally passed through the process and will be before the people in November on the ballot. Okay? In the House, they introduced 54 HJRs, and 0 will be passed, got through the process. Okay, so out of that total, only 1 will come before the people in November. I think that I talked a little bit about our responsibility on your behalf in Jefferson City. And I don't think our role is to go down there and just pass a bunch of laws. Okay, but what our Constitution says is the most important role that we have, and really the only constitutional thing we're charged to do in each session, is to go down and pass a balanced budget. Now, we're fortunate. We're blessed in Missouri, and there are other states that have this, but not all states. You can think of the state of Illinois that has a budget deficit of $13 billion. You can think of the state of California that I believe has a $30 billion deficit. Okay? We can't run deficit spending in Missouri. That's in our Constitution. And guess what? That's a good thing. Because I guarantee you, whether it's Republicans or Democrats, politicians will spend every dollar they get their hands on and more if you let them. All right? So it's a good thing that we have a balanced budget amendment. And in Missouri, since the Republicans took control 10 years ago, we have run balanced budgets, and I believe have done a very good job of being good stewards of the people's money. Now, over the last 3 years, like every other state, we've had budget crunches, and you've read about them in the newspaper. Revenues are down. Okay, and the only thing that has helped the states through this crisis is that Obama and his crew have a printing press in Washington, D.C., and they've continued to print money and send it to the states to bail them out of their budgets. And I have to be honest with you, the Republicans took that money. Now, for those that have been watching the papers the last couple of years, you've seen that there's been a fight, particularly in the Missouri Senate, about these monies, the stimulus money, the stabilization money, and how we spend it or don't spend it. And I've been one within the conservatives in the Senate that have said, let's not spend it all. Let's downsize and right-size our state government and put some of it in the bank for more or less a rainy day. All right? I haven't won that fight. Okay? We've spent every dime that we've gotten from the federal government. Now, the fact of the matter is the money has dried up now. There's no more stimulus money. There's no more stabilization money. And this budget year was the first budget year where we were facing that. Okay? And you might have read in this last session that there was a fight between the Republicans in the House and the Republicans in the Senate as far as what we were going to do budget-wise. Governor Nixon sent the House a budget that was out of balance, that was based on fictitious revenue numbers, that banked on a lot of growth in the lottery, and actually was predicated on a couple of bills passing through the legislature that would create new revenue sources. Okay, one of them was a bill that was tax amnesty. I don't know if you've heard of that bill. But what it would do is for people that owed the government money back taxes, it would give them amnesty. And they booked $70 million, the governor's budget, saying that if we pass this bill, it will bring in $70 million. And they got that number based on doing this about 20 years ago, and that was in the neighborhood of what they were able to accomplish. Well, those in the Senate that decided, well, that's not a good fiscal, way to establish our budget, said, no, we're not going to pass that bill. And our plan with that was, let's make the necessary downsizing, the necessary cuts, let's live within the means that we have and make the corrections to state government. And if that means that we have to lay off state workers, if that means we have to cut programs here, or here, then that's what we have to do. Okay? Well, we didn't end up doing that. Matter of fact, we passed a budget that gave the state employees a 2% raise. And myself and others fought against that. We lost that fight. Okay? The reason I shared this with you is, in our economy, I don't think that we're going to see over the next couple of years a real growth in our economy, in our revenues. And I think that we had the opportunity this last year and the year before to actually right-size our state government, and we didn't take advantage of it. So it'll be an interesting year next year to see how the revenues come in, and if we will be hit with a big supplemental, which what that means is 6 months into the fiscal year, the departments come back and say, hey, we've spent all our money, we need more. So that'll be an interesting situation that we'll have to deal with. And if the revenues come in like projected, which I don't believe they will, about 40 million of these dollars that this budget is balanced on are in addition to lottery, and lottery has never grown that much in 1 year. Matter of fact, the most lotteries ever grown in 1 year is $21 million, and that's in a good year. So it's hard for me to believe that it will grow that much, in this next fiscal year. So I think it's very important. The most important thing that we do is pass a balanced budget, and I think it's very important for us to be truthful to Missouri taxpayers and not use fuzzy math when we're doing it. So I've been very outspoken on that. You can go and Google me, and you can see that, like I've done things this session myself, and they called us the Gang of Nine. There were 8 others in the Senate that actually filibustered the budget until we got a number of changes to it that we thought were a lot more manageable and a lot more responsible. We got those changes. But we're dealing with our own party. So sometimes I'm not the most popular guy in Jefferson City. Last year, I stood up and I filibustered the extension to unemployment benefits for about 5 weeks, myself and a few of my compadres. And my position was, again, these are monies coming from the federal government that they're borrowing from the next generation, from my children and grandchildren. And our position was, we thought 79 weeks was enough. This was an extension, the 4th extension, by the way, from the federal government, that would take it to 99 weeks. 99 weeks of unemployment, that's almost 2 years. We're individuals, and I know times are tough, but they're asking their neighbors, to foot the bill for this. So, again, I take on tough issues because I think I'm down there to represent the taxpayers, the people that are footing the bill. I want to talk a little bit about a couple of bills that did pass that I think are important. We passed workers' comp reform that went to the governor's desk. We're not sure if he'll sign this bill. Early on in the session, we passed a different version of it that he thought went too far, and he vetoed it. So we'll have the opportunity to override the governor's veto on that bill. He may sign this because it's a weaker bill than the first one that we sent him. But it does take us in the right direction. It's good for our state's employers, and in that respect, it creates jobs. It makes us more friendly to either open a business or expand a business in Missouri. And those are the type of things that we need to do to attract jobs and grow jobs in Missouri. We also passed a bill that established a dedicated funding source for our veterans' homes in the state. And this is an important piece of legislation because the veterans have almost been held hostage every year as far as will we have the monies to fund the veterans' homes in Missouri. And this is a promise that we've made to our veterans, and I think it's important that they have a dedicated fund, rather than finding out are they going to come up on the short end of the stick, every year, depending on the appropriations and how the monies are coming in. We also sent a bill passed in the House and the Senate. It's on the governor's desk that curbs excessive regulations in the state. Now, this is something that, again, is very important to our business climate, and really something that needs to happen at the federal level. When you think about all the regulation that the federal government, puts on business, we're trying to do our part at the state level to make us more attractive. We're bordered by 8 states, more than any other state in the union, and we got to compete with those states. So this is, again, another effort from your Republican majorities to make our state more business friendly so that we can create jobs. Let's see. We passed a bill, and this should be important to certainly that 71% of Missouri voters that voted against or voted for Prop C, if you can remember that a couple of years ago. We passed a bill that prohibits the establishment or operation of a health insurance exchange. This is one of the key components to Obamacare, where the bill actually says that every state has to establish an exchange by 2014. Well, we passed a law that says you can't even do it. All right, so again, this is us taking on the federal government and saying this is outside your purview. We're not going to wait on the Supreme Court to see what they have to say. It's clear that within Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution, you don't have this power. So we're not the only state, but we're one of the states that have come forward and said, no, not in our state you don't. So this is another way for us to stand up to the federal government and say no. I talked a little bit about, well, I didn't talk about it, but SJR 51 adds accountability to our judicial selection process. This is the SJR that I passed and that I've been working to pass for the last 7 years, which changes the way that we choose our judges for our Supreme Court and for our appellate courts in the state. The current process actually has a commission, 7-person commission, that's controlled by attorneys. It has 4 attorneys and 3 lay people appointed by the governor on the commission. What my SJR would do if we changed the Constitution, if you vote for this, it would change that so that there would be 4 lay people appointed by the governor and only 3 attorneys on the commission. So the attorneys would still have input. It's their profession. They know a lot about what makes a good judge. But they wouldn't be picking the judges that they actually try their cases before. And what's happened over the years in Missouri is that it's become very political among the Missouri bar as far as them campaigning only with their members of the bar, not accountable to the people, only to that small sector of special interest. So that this would make that change. It also would put before the governor a slate of 4 candidates that he could choose. Currently it's 3 candidates. Our thought there was it'd be tougher to game the panel with 4 choices for the governor. And you know what? Elections have consequences. And when we elect a governor, we need to be able to hold that governor accountable for the judges that he picks and puts on the bench. And that's the way our system was originally set up. The checks and balances between the branches. This wasn't the perfect bill. The perfect bill for me was the federal model. And I also introduced that, but it got no traction. I've introduced it for years. We've never been able to get it out of committee. But if you know, the federal model is the president nominates, and then the Senate confirms. Okay, so you have between the 3 branches multiple checks, so that we're accountable for who our judges are when they get to the bench. I'm going to try to be humble here. I think this is the most important piece of legislation that we've probably got through the General Assembly since Medicaid reform back in 2005. You can all remember when Matt Blunt was governor and we passed Medicaid reform in Missouri. That was a huge piece of legislation for us. This is a huge piece of legislation. It's very important that we change this so we can hold accountable someone for who picks the judges that serve on our bench, and is the highest bench in Missouri. We expanded the Missouri Do Not Call list to cell phones, which I think is a very good piece of legislation. And I'm sure there's many others, but not as not as important. What's happened the last couple of years in the Missouri General Assembly, and I really think that it's a product or a byproduct of term limits, is that because of all the change that happens in both chambers, and because with politicians that know they only have 2 years left, or 1 more term, or they're in their last term, there hasn't been the ability to build relationships, either on the same side of the aisle or the other side of the aisle. And I think that has created a lot more tension in a place. Nothing like Washington, D.C., but we've been accused of being dysfunctional in Jefferson City. I would argue against that point. I think that if you have a good piece of legislation, that you should be able to make your case for it, and you should be able to work it through the process. And I don't think there's a better example than SJR 51. Very, very controversial piece of legislation. And all the players got together around the table and said, this is what we will let get through. And I think at the end of the day, if a bill gets through that process, through the process of compromise, then it either has the opportunity to go to the governor or it has the opportunity to go to you, the people, for you to make the decision if you're going to change your statute or change your constitution. I think it should be very difficult to pass a law in Jefferson City. And so I would argue that even if one would make the case that we are dysfunctional, I think our founding fathers set the system up to be dysfunctional. I think government should move very slow. Whenever government moves fast, you lose. So I would encourage you, and you're certainly people that are interested in the process, that want to be active, that be the communication. Don't be afraid of a government that it looks like there's gridlock, okay? Because the taxpayers win in that regard. So I think I probably went on too long, Rich. Can I answer any questions? I'd be happy to address any questions you might have. Yes.
Have the lawmakers in Jefferson City dealt with the controversial, what is it, Missouri Mutual Insurance?
MEM. That was my bill also. I introduced that bill. And there were actually 3 bills that were introduced. Actually, I chair governmental accountability. And when that issue kind of blew up last year, my committee did multiple hearings on that. Took a lot of testimony. I introduced a bill to privatize MEM. And for everybody else, it is a insurance company that does work comp for small business. And they were created by the legislature, I believe, in 1993. And they own 16% of the market. And because of the way they were created in Missouri statute, they enjoy certain tax breaks and tax incentives that their competitors do not. And they got into a little bit of trouble a couple of years ago with a couple of their board members that are appointed by the governor. And after my committee looked at it, we introduced a bill that said it's time, they served their purpose. At the time, no one was writing work comp insurance in Missouri. It was very difficult for our businesses to actually get the insurance that the statute mandated that they have. So this entity was created. They fulfilled their purpose. There are now 209 companies writing work comp insurance in the state of Missouri. And our point was that they've served their purpose. They need to compete on an equal level with all their competitors. We're going to take their advantages away from them. My bill didn't make it through the process. The bill that made it through the process was Senator Roop's bill. Actually, all 3 of the bills came through his committee, so that might tell you why his bill was the one that made it out of committee. His bill studies the issue for another year. I voted against the bill. I think I might have been the only senator that voted against it. My committee studied it for a number of months. I think we've done all the studying we need to do. I don't know where you are on the issue, but so it'll be an issue that we revisit. In the interim, this committee will actually study the issue again, and hopefully, we'll look at some things that how we can either make it better or correct it.
Have the abuses of the board members been rectified?
Well, interestingly enough, both the board members, I don't know if you know the story of this, but the abuses didn't have anything to do with MEM. It was, I think one person worked for a bank and they were embezzling from the bank. And what was the other, Jamie, do you remember?
But the other one was the former governor and the campaign contributions they made.
The federal government came in to look at this because they actually used some of MEM's money and actually wrote checks to the Democratic candidates or the Democratic Party.
Right, which is illegal because
so,
of tax incentives.
Yeah, they have been rectified, but both of those board members have died since. So, and the former governor, Roger Wilson, has been indicted. So, yes, I think that they've cleaned it up. I think the question now is, the way they exist currently, do they need to continue to enjoy those tax advantages they have over their competitors? Yes, sir.
I thought I heard you say that you favor compromise. Under what conditions do you favor compromise?
Well, I'll never compromise, my principles or where I stand on, life or what the role of government is. But, passing a bill out of the Missouri Senate is a very difficult thing, and often you don't get the full loaf of bread. And I think that the SJR, again, is a good example. The bill I preferred was the federal model, but I thought that this was a step in the right direction for more accountability. That's a compromise. Okay, so compromise, on the surface sometimes has a very negative connotation, but the process of lawmaking, there's compromise.
So as long as it's a step in the right direction.
Well, and I tell people, my votes in Jefferson City are based on two things: my oath and Constitution, and whether what I'm doing and the vote that I'm making is constitutional, and the idea that I serve in a representative republic. And when I go and talk to my constituents and hear from my constituents on a certain issue, then I vote that way, as long as, again, it doesn't compromise, my oath and the Constitution or my principles. What?
Well, I just want to know
I
what
have a question.
I just want to know what type of ice cream you're going to serve at your wonderful
Well,
kickoff.
I'm going to
ice cream
talk
social.
about that after I answer the questions, but thank you. That's a good staff right there.
I
Yes.
just wanted to ask you now, the cigarette tax
Yes.
is coming up for a vote of the citizens. Does that say a certain amount?
I think it takes us
How
from
does that work?
17 cents a pack to $1 a pack.
All right, make it $2 a pack.
So
It
that,
makes it to 90 cents? Okay, all right. And you have a question there? Or?
no, I just wanted to know how that works.
Well, I would make this argument unless you have the position that you want to raise them so people stop smoking. We balance our budget on sin taxes, and especially cigarette taxes. Okay, a lot of money comes in from cigarette taxes. And if we take away that competitive edge that we have currently from our bordering states, now, we heard yesterday that I think Illinois just raised theirs another $1. So,
Right?
I would make the argument that people are not going to drive across the borders to buy their cigarettes and their gasoline here if we raise them, and we will be revenue neutral, or we may even lose revenue. I don't know. I mean, I remember the numbers, but don't think because we raise that's going to solve all our fiscal problems. Okay, because people just stay at home and buy their cigarettes and their gasoline. I mean, the reason they're coming across, into Missouri, is because our gas and our cigarettes are a lot cheaper.
That's right.
So, yes, sir.
Okay, I've got two questions.
Okay.
The first one is, having been in the Senate, have you ever voted present?
No. No. I've never voted present in all of my career.
What is that?
Well, you have the ability either to vote yes, no, or present.
Which is a neutral vote.
Yeah.
Like abstain.
And generally, I mean, if a politician's got any savvy at all, they would walk out of the room.
No, the
instead
reason,
of voting
obviously,
present,
the
but,
reason why I said that is because Obama did that all the time.
Right.
Okay. My other question is, you came up with a stack of bills like that. Is there anything else interesting in your stack that we should know about?
Well, there's probably some other things in there. I'll leave it with you if you like. But there's just so much. I can't think of anything. Let me think. Yes, Frida, while I'm looking.
What can we all do to get SJR 51 passed on the ballot?
Well, I mean, I think that when your friends and neighbors, ask, because it's not an easy issue to understand. Okay, when they ask, the message should be, this is about being able to hold somebody accountable. Currently, under the current system, it's controlled by the Missouri Bar, you cannot hold anybody, there's nobody electable that you can hold accountable. Okay, they're not accountable to the voters. This will allow us to point to the governor and say, this is on you, Governor. You're the one that picked the 4 lay people that serve on the commission, that put the panel of choices before you. Okay, so you can put it and point at the governor. And I think that's a step in the right direction for accountability. I'll tell you what, I'm going to look through this, and if I see
You want to
something.
do your tell us about your kickoff?
Yes, yeah. My kickoff is, and we've got some invites back there, is at my headquarters on South Lindbergh on June 10th. Is that correct, Jamie?
Yep, Sunday,
June 10th. It's going to be an ice cream social, and I'll actually be serving up the ice cream for you. So come down and have some free ice cream.
Love that.
On me. All right?
Where on Lindbergh is that?
It's at 5714 South Lindbergh, which is
It's real
Tesson
close.
Ferry in Lindbergh. Are you
Yes.
familiar with the Tesson Ferry Library?
Yeah, okay.
We're a block up from there, right next to Enterprise Leasing, right there. And what else have we got? We've got some sign-up sheets back there. If you would like to help out in our campaign, we'd certainly appreciate all the help we can get. I think I've also got some bumper stickers back there if you would like a bumper sticker put on your car. That certainly helps. I'm going to be spending a lot of time in this new part of the district, trying to get to know people, knocking on a lot of doors. So appreciate any help. One of the things I really love to do is have coffees. If you want to host a coffee for me, invite your neighbors, say, come and meet this guy, he wants to be your next senator. It'd be great.
We serve wine after our.
Well, wine is even better than coffee, because it doesn't keep me up at night.
Maybe I'll run a little while and.
Yeah, I'll do that.
Yeah. Share maybe some other legislative.
I'll go
nuggets
through
with
there
us.
and see if there's anything of great value.
But let's show our appreciation for the great. We rarely have 2 speakers of this quality, but so this is a very special evening, and we have with us McNary, who's presently a state rep from the, and I had it here, that's what I have this here, the 86th district, and that's the Chesterfield district, and he's represented that area well, and he even got some kudos from a senator, which is
Very
well,
rare.
Well earned. He's a personal friend of mine. He's a family man. He has a last name that I think many of you are familiar with. But without further ado, I'd like to introduce Cole McNary, who's running for state treasurer.
Well, thanks for the opportunity to come and introduce myself and talk to you a little bit about the treasurer's race. I was at an event for Paul Kurtman. He's a state rep. He's kind of a darling of the Tea Parties. And so he's going to represent an area in Franklin County. So I was at his event, kind of working the room, and I heard some people say, well, there's a banner with my dad's name on it. And it kind of had the dates of when he served as prosecuting attorney and county executive. And one was saying to the other, I think he's dead. I think he's passed away. And the other, no, I think that he's still living. And so I walked over and I said, I think I can help settle this. And my dad, I saw him 4 times in 1 week. We had a graduation for my younger daughter, graduated from high school, and he showed up at all the festivities. It must have been that there was beer or wine or something. And so, you know, we had some fun. And but he's doing well, and I think that he's really enjoying the fact that I'm running statewide and not him. And that he's getting to go to more Cardinal baseball games than I am. So it's been kind of fun because, you know, as a kid I worked in his campaigns. And one summer, I dedicated all summer long, it really wasn't an option. We had our orders. I had 2 brothers, and we all worked in his campaign. And we were all over the state all summer long, and I actually met my wife in that campaign. And we've been married for 23 years.
Really?
So, so we kind of joked that it was an arranged marriage. He wasn't, but I just fell into something good. So I've tried to encourage more young people to get involved in these campaigns, or really anybody, because you never know what good things could happen. And If you already have a wife, there might be some other opportunities to get involved. You know, Jim's is a good race to get involved in. He needs your help in this area. And you know, what Jim's operation reminds me of is my kids used to go to a Montessori school where, as a parent, if you showed up and you said, I want to help you, they would give you a job. You would be reading, you would be writing poetry, you would be doing all sorts of things that you might wanted to do, might not wanted to do. But if you show up at Jim's, he will have a job for you and you will feel appreciated, and you'll help him get elected because he only runs in Democrat districts. So he needs your help. I wanted to talk a little bit about the work that I've done in the legislature. And a little bit about the treasurer's race, because I think it's all related. When I was elected 4 years ago, I knocked on a lot of doors. You know, I just took I just did what Jim did, which was knock on doors and talk to people. And I got elected, but my district is really Republican. So I ran in a 6-way primary, and then ran in the general and was elected as a conservative. And when we were first, we were there kind of with the orientation in the legislature. We had Ron Richard was our speaker, and he said, "You guys sit there, get your butts in chairs, be on time, and listen, because there's more senior people who've been there longer. They have an agenda, and that's what's going to go." So it's a little bit like showing up for a play where you don't have any lines, and for you to speak out and do something, it just doesn't fit the script. So that's pretty much what I did in the first year. I tried to watch and pay attention. And then in the second year, I had a singular bill that I tried to pass. And my theme wasn't merely what Jim was talking about, which was, so many laws. It's just unwieldy. And if whether you're on the right or the left, people agree that government is out of control. And so we really tried to think about, well, how do you reverse the dominant trend, which is just churning, writing ever more laws. And Jim might blame it on term limits. I think it's partially term limits, but the lobbyists are good. I mean, these guys are professional. They've been there for a long time. If ever there's any continuity of experience in the legislature, it's in the lobbies and people who are hired to get their legislation passed. So those guys are just too good. So our movement started with a singular bill. It was House Bill of 1965, and it included about 300 old expired statutes that really had kind of lost their purpose. And it was something that we felt that everybody would be in favor of, and it came down to the last week of the session, and it passed with 2 votes, and we had 1 Democrat vote with us. It's really hard. It's like what Jim says. It's really hard to pass a piece of legislation. And in that singular bill, we saved a little less than $2 million. Through printing, we got rid of the blue book. Turned out the legislators are giving, the blue book? Mm-hmm. It has all the salaries. It shows you're a state employee. You'll be in there. Nobody wants to show up for work on that day when it comes out. And but what would happen is that the Secretary of State's office would call and say, "How many blue books do you want?" I'm like, "I don't know. I don't want any blue books." And so we ended up taking 2 because I felt like, doesn't everybody take blue books? And we gave 1 to the library and 1 to the mayor. And what we found is that people just took these things and gave them away as brochures. Thanks for helping in my campaign. And the unit cost they're big thick things, and the unit cost is about $10 a unit. And we just felt that it was a waste, and the information is available practically for free on the internet. So we had some help in the Senate to get that attached to the bill, and we saved the money. We saved some money by doing it. So that was the beginning, and then that bill was referenced in a New York Times article where it's now Governor Brownback from Kansas talked about the same kind of thing, that laws have grown and we need an office of a repealer. And I thought, ooh, I like that. The office of a repealer. So when we had a new speaker, Speaker Tilley, and he came to me and said, what do you want to do next session? And I told him, I want that. I want the office of the repealer. I don't want a formal committee. I just want an army of freshmen. We had this really big freshman class coming in. And they would be told the same thing, right? Show up on time, get your butts in the chairs, and listen. But I wanted them to comb through the statutes and try to find stuff that we could eliminate. And to Speaker Tilley's credit, he turned it into a formal committee in the House called Downsizing State Government. So we passed more, 2 bills, and then next year, and this year we had 4 bills go through that committee. And 4 doesn't sound like that much, but it's 38% of all the bills that went through the committee. It's far and away more than any committee in the House. And so, knowing how hard it is to pass legislation, I'm very proud of the fact that we got a lot of things, at least as a percentage, a lot of things passed. So I'll give you an idea of the kind of things that went through the committee. One was a bill that allows you to pay electronically, right? So you go to the supermarket, you go to the mall, you pay with a credit card. You could pay for government services electronically now too. One dealt with, this is the one that Jim mentioned, rules and regulations have to be brought up for review. There's a formal complaint process where you could eliminate the rule if people think that it's unwieldy or unfair. And then we have to go through all the regulations. I've heard that there are about 6,000 pages worth. So there's a schedule created so that over the next decade, they will be reviewed, and we'll try to eliminate ones that have lost their purpose. Another one was a reorganization of the executive branch. Really what's going on here is that anytime you do something, you write new laws. If there is something in this volume of the statutes and over here there's another thing, if you just want to put it together because it fits and it makes sense, you can't do it. You have to write another law, just put it back, put them near each other. So we changed it so that if there's something that is non-substantive, they just want to retitle it, make sense, reorder, put it together. The legislature could do that without having to pass legislation. So it doesn't sound like that big of a deal, but every little bit helps. And then there was the last one, I think it actually had my name on it, although I try to turn most of this over to other people. And there were about 60 programs that were unfunded. And so we eliminated them. And then there was some pushback. We put sunsets on those programs. And I think Jim helped with that one. So he was our sponsor over in the Senate, and I don't think that there was much opposition to it. And so he helped us get that passed. So those were the 4. I think what's important is that this is just dipping our toe into a big ocean of stuff that we really need to clean up. But we have a start now. We have people in the legislature who are excited about this kind of work, that is getting rid of laws as opposed to churning and writing new stuff. And I know that this sounds very nerdy to you. I love it. So it's really what I want to bring to the Treasurer's Office. And the Treasurer's Office, people don't really know what the Treasurer's Office does. It invests the money. It invests your money. It manages an account of about $3 billion at any given time in what is kind of short-term deposits. And then they have some other programs. But I think that the Treasurer's Office could be more. It could be much more. And what you're finding is that governments around the world at all levels, they're going broke. And they're going broke because they've spent too much money. And I think that there are 2 things that state governments all need to work on. And one is long-term planning. The nature of government is however much money we collect, we spend every penny. But that is not a prudent thing to do. So we really need to, I think the Treasurer's Office needs to work with the legislature. We need to put some money in the rainy day fund. We need to set some priorities. So I'd like to do some of that work. And then secondly, all the states are having to wrestle with pension problems. And we need to reform our pensions. All the states are having to do it. I think Missouri is in much better shape than Illinois or California. But all the states are having to wrestle with this. And I think that it is rightly done by the Treasurer's Office to work with the legislature to put together some kind of a program. So that's really what I'd like to do if I was lucky enough to be elected. Now, I want to talk lastly, just some inside politics. My opponent, he's the current, I don't want to say his name, but I guess I have to. His name is Clint Zweifel. He was a state rep, North County. He came in with Obama in the last election as treasurer. Before that, he worked for the Teamsters. So he wasn't a Teamster. He worked for the Teamsters for about a dozen years or so. And we know that he wants to use the Treasurer's Office as a stepping stone to run for governor in 2012, and he is a darling of the Democrats. Now, you might be thinking, oh, big deal. Now, did anybody, if you think back, did anybody really think that Obama was that big of a deal? Community organizer, former constitutional law professor, 2-year Senate, or a junior senator from Illinois. He looks good, speaks well. All the women were googly-eyed over this guy. And now he's the president. And we have a nightmare on our hands because he's just not up to the job. Now, I think there's some parallels here. And I hope you could see what it would be like having the former Teamster union boss, Missouri governor, or I think you get the...
And I was going to say, and then you have Claire McCaskill.
They're all aligned, right? Or, I'll give you another example. I share an office with Ed Martin, right? Kind of in my wanting to save taxpayer money, just be thrifty in general. We share an office. We put up signs together. We do a lot of things together. He's running against Chris Koster, former Republican, found religion with the Democratic Party. He gets most of his money from trial attorneys. Does anybody think that this guy would be a good governor in 2016?
Is he running for Attorney General?
He's running for Attorney General, that's right. So, I hope that you'll support Ed for Attorney General, you support me for State Treasurer, because, you have a choice, right? You're going to have a choice in this election. You can support candidates who are big liberals and big government people, or you can support people that are small government conservatives. And I hope that you'll choose the small government conservatives. I will take any question. Oh, I did want to say that right on the table was bumper stickers. Ridgewood was sporting my campaign piece where you could put in a check statewide campaign. Right when you run for state rep, you get all your family and kids to help you knock on doors. I don't have enough relatives statewide to make the difference. So if you could help me out, I'd appreciate that. And there's bumper stickers. Those are worth a lot of money in advertising.
Yeah, could you tell us more about your background?
Sure. I'm from here, St. Louis.
Yeah, I know.
I studied aviation in college, got a degree in aviation management from Auburn. I worked for Saberliner after college, and then I got an MBA from SLU. Worked for Monsanto mainly as a sales rep for them. And then I moved back to St. Louis to work for Enterprise and their operations, data mining, data warehouse type work eventually. And then I was working with kids, and I really enjoyed it, so I went back to college and I got a teaching certificate in physics. And I had my first teaching gig over at Vianney. I was teaching mathematics, not physics, over there. And I was kind of recruited to run for state rep, and teaching and state rep pays about the same. And I was, yeah, it's too bad. But I was an easy mark because I had a good political name. I like political economy. I didn't want to run for a long time, and the reason is because I did not want to give talks. And my dad said to me, it is not about talking. Running for office is about listening. And that is very true.
Well, physics and math and treasure are pretty close.
Well, it is. I think you have to identify what are the dominant trends. And if they're positive, keep them going. If they're negative, somehow reverse the trend.
What was your father's best political job?
What was his?
Yes.
I don't know. He was county executive for 15 years.
County executive?
And I think he enjoyed that job quite a bit.
He also was with the people that come into the country.
He had worked for Immigration and Naturalization Service under the Bush Senior. And sometimes I bust his chops and say, Dad, you did such a good job, they eliminated your entire department, which has never, ever happened. I think they actually rolled it into Homeland Security, so it's probably bigger than ever. There's a question back here.
Well, I just was wondering, the unclaimed property office seems.
Right, that is administered by the Treasurer's Office.
Seems to be the way for the secretary to get his face out there and be on TV and all that.
Right, for the treasurer to use it to build name ID.
Right.
I think, if I were treasurer, I wouldn't do it that way. He did a public service announcement. Just so by contrast, this was an article just in the Post. And the Attorney General is Koster. Koster had a public service announcement about Medicaid fraud. And so we went over to DESE, that's the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. He used their studio. He had about $700 of production costs
His kitchen table
in
or
producing
something.
it. Zweifel spent $850,000 in production costs, putting him and his family on a TV commercial. I haven't seen the commercial. But I mean, he's in every program that the Treasurer's Office administers, the main focus is his building his name ID.
Yeah.
Now, for the good thing for us is that the polling that we've done, that the name ID, it hasn't gotten him the name ID he had hoped for. As an incumbent, nobody knows either of us. In St. Louis, lots more people know McNary than his wife. So don't ever say his name.
The reason I bring it up, I guess it was last year in the Post, there were pages and pages and pages of unclaimed property names. And it seemed to, I guess it's a state law that you have to publish these, periodically, but it seemed like an incredible expense for something that, you can look up on the internet for nothing.
Yeah, I think that's really where it needs to take place. Or, there's probably a way that you could tie in with Department of Revenue and those fee offices. So, you go get your license and then there'd be some way so that it would trigger your name and, oh, by the way, you might call this Treasurer's Office, there might be some unclaimed property.
Yeah.
I think so.
It just seemed like a waste of money to
Yeah, and we could,
publish things.
if I were treasurer, I'd work with the legislature to change the law. We're not in business to keep the newspapers in business. There's cheaper ways to do it. And the newspapers are also they have electronic internet presence and all that sort of thing too. So thanks for the opportunity to be here tonight. Thanks, Rich, for having me.
Okay, Frida, I'd like to give you a report.
Hello. Hi. I just have a few little things to talk about. I had some new maps printed of the new Jefferson Township. It's back at the wall, as well as the new 2nd Congressional District and how the 2nd Congressional District, what Senate districts it covers. So they're back on the wall, and I'll bring them back every time we have a meeting. I have printouts of all the candidates that affect us. The governor, Secretary of State, Attorney General, McNary, all those people, including we are now the 91st Representative District, and our candidate is Elizabeth Steele. She's a resident of Webster Groves. I'm gonna try to have her in one of the meetings. Good. Remember, there's an election on June 5. It's about the MSD district. Why? No matter what you do with it, you have to pay. You can vote yes, and your sewer bill will go from $24 to $48. Period. There's nothing you can do about it. Or you can vote no, and your sewer bill will go to over $60. But you save $945 million in interest rate because there's no bonds. So it's better to vote no if you can afford an increased monthly expense of $60 or $65.
So the
Remember.
cheapest is yes, right?
The cheapest is yes.
Is there any
But-
way to get that repealed?
No. You have to-
Ever?
Well, you have to talk to the EPA. It's an EPA lawsuit.
Yeah,
and
it
MSD
You want me
is.
to do
It's
an
got-
editorial on that?
Yes.
Because that's just something that
What-
happened
what-
because of Obama.
What the EPA
No.
has done is that they have gone into many major cities like St. Louis,
And they
who
mandated
has,
it.
we have a very old infrastructure of our wastewater and sewer water, okay? And they've said to the city of St. Louis and other cities that you have to clean up your act, or, you know, we're coming in and fining you or whatever they're going to do, whatever their threat is. It's $3 to $4 billion that it's
Yeah,
costing the
huge.
people of
4.7 billion.
Yes,
4.7 billion.
billions.
And I've had some discussions offline with employees of MSD, and what this is all about is
Union
that
jobs.
is the system that we have that currently runs into the Mississippi River. It's going to clean up that water so that it gets to a point, they have some kind of scale as far as to make it decent to swim in. Now, this is what was told to me. So, can you envision anybody swimming in the Mississippi River in front of the arch? All right. What I've been told is what this is going to accomplish is so small in its scope as far as what this wastewater that's actually going into the Mississippi. And it's the times where we get a lot of rain, and then the waters come together and then go into the Mississippi, and this is going to fix that system, okay? The point of the matter, I'm going to vote no on it, okay? Because, you know, I just think this is overreach of the federal government again, and we should stand firm on it. I'd like to see a class action lawsuit against it and the people.
Against the
You know,
EPA.
Sue the EPA.
Right.
It is
Oh,
going
that's
to
great.
hurt us competitively in Missouri.
Well, I mean, bottom line is it's going to cost the
Yeah.
taxpayers, you know,
Zillions.
$4.7 billion,
Yeah.
you know, that I don't believe we should be spending there. You know, so, again, you know, they've couched this thing so
Right.
that,
But
you
you
know,
can
you can
vote-
pay now, you can pay later, you can pay more, you can pay less, but
Yes, sir.
Pardon me, I thought this was a court case already. And this
I'm not
came
saying
out
it
of
wasn't.
court.
It
I'm not
said-
saying
I
it
thought
wasn't
you
a court
wanted to
case.
sue, and they've already sued. And they lost, and that's why they're
The
doing it.
EPA sued the city of St. Louis.
There's already been a court case,
Right.
and the courts have decided this to go. What we're voting on, you can vote no,
Mhm.
and
But
then
you
your
still-
rate goes way
Right.
up. Or you can vote yes, and you're my age, I'd rather pay it for the next 8 or 10 years, the lower rate, and the rest of you guys can worry over the 30 years.
Exactly.
Now, I just,
Well,
it's already been.
I'm always trying to look out for, my children and my grandchildren as far as, what we're heaping on top of them. And this is just another example of intrusive big government, and yeah, the courts have
They've
said
already
this.
settled it.
Yeah. That doesn't mean there can't be another suit from a different direction.
Well,
Who's going to pay for it?
Well, I mean, again, we have to
Yeah,
make class
but
action laws.
then there could be another administration that comes in and repeals all this stuff.
Right.
So,
Well, that's a good point, too. Yeah,
you
yeah.
know.
So vote your conscience, go ahead. Never mind my editorial. Hey, while I've got the floor, I want to say one more thing I didn't cover. We have a $24 billion budget in the state of Missouri, $24 billion, okay? It's broken down into thirds. About a third of that, $8 billion, comes from general revenue, from your taxes and taxes of our businesses and corporations. About $8 billion comes from the federal government, and about $8 billion comes from dedicated taxes that we all pay, okay, that are dedicated to different, like the road fund, and they come from the gasoline tax, okay, dedicated taxes. The point I wanted to make there is, in our $24 billion, in this year's budget, $10 billion of that went to welfare programs. $10 billion, over 40%. Okay, and that just is just another. When we have to go down, Cole, others we have to go down and make our decisions on what the priorities of the people of the state are. A lot of that is driven by federal mandates when we get involved in these federal welfare programs. Okay, Medicaid, food stamps, TANF, those three programs add up to roughly $10 billion in our state. Just if you ever have a conversation and people say that we're not a generous people, as far as having a safety net and taking care of the poor, we're very generous people.
Just a few more things.
When are we going to keep the $8 million? Yeah, we need a house cleaning in
Yes.
November.
I said before, we have an election, June 5. It's the MSD issue. The Board of Election is always looking for poll workers. I have little cards up at the table. You can sign up to become a poll worker. Don't pay you for it. And it's important for the upcoming elections in August and in November that we have enough Republican poll workers. Because what often happens, we don't have enough Republican poll workers, and Democrats step in for the day to be a Republican. That's an open invitation for voter fraud. We cannot let that happen. So just keep that in mind. And one more thing. We haven't talked about memberships for a while. We've sort of gotten away from that, but we'll probably start asking for membership and membership fees again, because there's always incidental expenses like we have for the caucus process. So we'll be asking people to sign up to be a member. It's only $10. That's all I have. Thank you.
I have one more thing before we conclude, and that is, I'm the fun meister of the group, and so I hope, with a little reception afterwards, and we hope you'll all stay so we can all have fun. But I also give out the kind of door prize, and it's totally up to me who it goes to. And I was going to have this all put a name in a hat. Hold on, I was going to put all our names in a hat, and that just gets so cumbersome. And then I was going to say, well, whose birthday is today or tomorrow or the next day? And I just decided that this is going to go to this couple who is new to us tonight, who was here for the caucus, and the two of you can enjoy this book about Bobby Jindal. Wow. You're very welcome.
I think we're going to come back with you.
That's right.
Nice.
We'll wear disguises. So, Rich, you want to close?
All right, well, we had a great meeting, and appreciate the great turnout, particularly this time of year. And I'd like to invite you to join us in the back for some refreshment. And I appreciate Jim and Cole sticking around. And you can ask them more questions, perhaps. Let them get a glass of wine first.
Oh. You got yours, so. Yeah, man.
Thanks for the question.
Pick up a card.
All right.
What'd you say, Sam?
In depth on everything here.
I can send it back.
Yeah, I'm good. You should come down and go to Dirt Sheet, right over there, Dirt Sheet, and that's good. And another discount store. You can go over to the park and see the album. On their books, it says that that's illegal contraband.
Every state's got this.
If I were to roll something